This is the age that begins to say to each one of us, now you've reached this age, and so what are you going to do for the next 42 years? What are your decisions in relationship to life? How can you account for the first 42 years of your life? And what do you find now? Otherwise, that period is one's breaking point. Sometimes in terms of the cycle, we might speak more or less in terms of the feminine cycle of that age of 40. It's a very important age as we can begin to understand it. And these questions which we were defining just a while ago as
most people don't even go through the bag. First of all, they don't know they're carrying it. That's one.
Yeah.
The second thing they do, they don't go look and see what's inside of it.
Right.
Take out what they can use, and get rid of the rest, and that kind of thing. Because we're not conditioned to even think like that. You don't question, you got these feelings. Well, where did it come from? They say you are not your body, you are not your feelings, and you are not your thoughts. Just like you're not your car. Although some people are their car. But you're not. It's a vehicle, it's an instrument that so you can experience and learn and grow and move. So let's finish this. So we had the conscious self or I. The self, that is to say, the point of pure self-awareness is often confused with the conscious personality, which deals with your field of consciousness. That goes back with the thing we talked about, the experience itself. If people are only conscious of a certain reality, and they identify with that reality, that's their sense of self becomes defined by that. And one of our major problems, we talk about how they keep African people just thinking in terms of slave experience, so that becomes their field of consciousness, so then their identity of self is directly related to only that reality. So then you're only capable of those qualities that are in that field of consciousness. So if you don't understand how you existed in great empires and civilizations and how you ruled and changed the course of the Nile and navigated the seas and charted the stars, your field of consciousness would change and your possibilities change. So then, also when your conscious mind has been conditioned, when your true self tries to express itself, it doesn't conform with your environment and your personality. The personality squashes it. That's when then the lower mind, that's when you're being ruled by the beast. Because the personality of the lower self is ruling the higher self.
But wouldn't that go with you outgrow your environment, and when you do, you have to change it. Either some people can't change their environment, maybe in the house, but outside of the house, no way. But if you want to move along, you go even higher, you have to change your environment. In other words, move away from that which has caused you to remain with what you are.
No. That's still consciousness. Because some people do not move away physically, but they move away conscious mentally. Because a lot of people still live in the hood, but not operate from where they're conditioned because some experiences expanded their awareness and they start to actively do consciousness. Some people moved away from the hood, but didn't change.
That's right.
Then you got those that move away, and because they were from the hood and don't want to identify with it, they react of trying not to be like it.
That's right.
And they're still trapped.
Right, okay.
They don't want to be there so much, they something they ain't too. They try not to be there. You're still trapped.
Yeah.
You're not controlling yourself. You're still controlled by what you're trying not to be. So, conscious self. Time up. Man. I always do this. 120 minutes, I need a 2-hour tape. Okay, it says this can be the kind of self, this can be ascertained by the use of careful introspection. Again, introspection is that whole issue about meditation and going within yourself and looking at yourself. It's also going to talk about a technique that I will share before we leave here, two techniques. The changing contents of our consciousness, the sensations, thoughts, and feelings, etc., are one thing, while the I, the self, the center of our consciousness is another. From a certain point of view, this difference can be compared to that existing between the white lighted area on a screen and the various pictures which are projected upon it. Get the difference of what he's talking about? The white light projected on the screen and the different images that are projected on it. It's two different things. Right? The white light is just the light that allows for the things to be seen. But it's different from the thing itself. Because it'll be the same light. You put different films up there, see different scenes, but it's the same light. That light is the true self. And the things that you're experiencing are just scenes that are passing by. We have a tendency to identify with images. And forget we're just experiencing these things on our field of consciousness. It's our self that's seeing it. Or, you have a situation. That's again, it goes right back to the first principle of steadfastness and understanding the real from the unreal, being unswerving in your relationship to the real. That means in your day, when you're being confronted with various things, if you say, okay, now I understand that there's a higher reality, as you're going through your day, can you stay on that understanding? Or do you start getting caught up in the other crap, the scenes, And the next thing you know, it's like, oh, I'm way over here, so anyway, moving forward here, till I get on the analogy. It says, but the man in the street, and even many well-educated people do not take the trouble to observe themselves and to discriminate. They drift on the surface of the mind stream and identify themselves with its successive waves, with the changing contents of their consciousness. That's why people get caught up in the fads.
That's right.
Okay. Like, what does this stuff mean? Why are you doing that? It's the happening thing. But what makes it happening? Related to what?
Following the crowd.
Right. You want to be accepted.
Right.
And then they put status on it, so just because you have it, you get played just because you have the image or the thing.
Right.
That's right.
So then they can control you now. They just keep changing and putting things out there, and you get hung up.
Chasing things.
Right. But then energy follows thought. So then if your energy is going into all of these successive things, which is an illusion, you're deplete of providing the necessary energy to build your own true self. It's like if we got one plug in the house, and you constantly got your thing plugged into a particular station that's just playing contemporary music 24/7. There's another station on there that can be giving you knowledge, wisdom, and understanding.
Yeah.
But if you keep it plugged into there, it ain't gonna be no juice going into the other thing. That's what's happening. They keep us plugged in. Higher self. The conscious self is generally not only submerged in the ceaseless flow of psychological contents, but seems to disappear altogether when we fall asleep. When we faint, when we are under the effects of an anesthetic or a narcotic, or in a state of hypnosis. That means that your sense of self, your conscious self, when you go to sleep, you're not conscious of yourself. Your conscious self fades from your consciousness. But when you faint, until you wake up, you don't know where you at. You out. Or if you really get out, on a trip somewhere, you're conscious of the trip. You're not conscious of yourself on the trip until you start trying to struggle with it. So he's trying to let you know that there is this entity in you that is going through these various changes. So it says, and when we awake, the self mysteriously reappears. We do not know how or whence, a fact which, if closely examined, is truly baffling and disturbing. This leads us to assume that the reappearance of the conscious self or ego is due to the existence of a permanent center, of a true self situated beyond or above it. There is various ways by means of which the reality of the self can be ascertained. There have been many individuals who have achieved more or less temporarily a conscious realization of the self that for them has the same degree of certainty as is experienced by an explorer who entered a previously unknown region. Such statements can be found in Buck's Cosmic Consciousness. That book actually chronicles, I don't know how many, 20-something high achievers that reached a state of illumination. Some only momentarily went into the state of consciousness where they united with their higher self and understood. It's almost like this analogy of when Moses goes to the mountaintop and talks to the burning bush, a fire that was not burning. They're talking about a state of illumination. He went to the mountaintop. Where's the top of the mountain? The top of the mountain is up here. It's the top of the mountain. So he went to the high level of consciousness. He went to the mountaintop and communed with the higher self, which gave him the inspiration on what was necessary to get these wild folks into a new state of consciousness. That's what he's really talking about. You think you're talking to God. But God, you are talking to God, but it's the God consciousness in you. That's the only way you can talk to anything is through your own mind. You can't talk to nothing outside of yourself.
And this is what's known as revelation or revelry.
Right.
It may be a momentary, because I personally have experienced this. It may be only a momentary contact,
right,
but it literally transcends time, space, and personality. Right. Ultimate reality. It's seeing heaven, seeing the face of heaven in a reality that really it's hard to even communicate to other people. But that moment is literally life-changing.
Right. So it also talks about, so if you're interested in understanding, because it talks about around between the ages of, a lot of this happened around the ages of 30 and 35. There was this period where a lot of these different experiences started happening, these life-transforming experiences happened where people really saw their purpose and who they really were and what they were really supposed to do and all that kind of stuff. So it's a good book. And he also gets into a lot of the principles and contacts, because all of it is related to the sonum bonum, because it talks about most, when they did experience this, they had a major unifying experience with nature, with life, and also they had a infusion in terms of a moral, ethical experience in terms of how they looked at life and humanity and all that. There's a book by Ouspensky on Tertium Organum, and Underhill's Mississippi. These are just books you can read. It says, then we have the corroboration of philosophers as Kant and Herbert, blah, 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 blah. We go back to Stoic Legacy and the ancient Hierophants, talk about the same thing in terms of these different states of heaven consciousness, nirvana, samadhi, Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, Krishna consciousness, Heru consciousness, Osiris consciousness. All those are talking about the same thing, the higher self. And then we have the seventh level, which is the collective unconscious. Human beings are not isolated. They are not monads without windows. They may at times feel subjectively isolated, but the extreme existentialistic conception is not true, either psychological or spiritual. The outer line of the oval of the diagram should be regarded as delimiting, not as dividing, which means that really the collective unconscious doesn't have a limit. They're only trying to do that to just give you a concept. In reality, everything interpenetrates everything else. It's not like stacks. It's like it interpenetrates, like energy fields. It's all interrelated. You know, all your different body organs and stuff is all there working together. You know, your heart is just sitting over here by itself. It's interconnected with your lungs, etc. So, which means the past, present, and future is all right here too. Right now, it's right here. The only thing that is keeping us from seeing it is our mind, how we think, and how we think. So if you can start opening your mind up and elevating your consciousness, you'll start seeing life in a totally different way. You can see how people are connected. You'll start seeing other things. A lot of people start seeing stuff like they get scared. They don't know what's going on. You start hearing different things, different sounds and stuff like that. They start tripping you out. A lot of people over in mental hospitals are really people who have opened up those other levels, but the society say they don't exist. So you must be crazy. Yeah.
That's why the Indians didn't kill the whites who wandered through the village talking to themselves and talking to different things. They didn't kill crazy people. They stayed out of their way because they knew they were in the other world.
Right. So then the outer line, the oval of the diagram, it should be regarded as analogous,
We need a new language.
To the membrane delimiting a cell, which permits a constant and active interchange of the whole body to which the cell belongs. Process of psychological osmosis are going on all the time. This is key. Psychological osmosis is going on all the time, both with other human beings and with the general psychic environment. That means that you're in contact, like we're in this room right now. Our energies are interrelated. We're tapping in. If we were more sensitized, we can pick up what's going on. But we're being fed, we're feeding each other, and we're being fed. That's why people like to come together too, because it's more than just a physical thing. It's the vibe and the energy. It's like, you know, you get a charge. You get the other. So you're talking about you want to put that book up on your head and just absorb it?
That's what I
do. It says the latter corresponds to what Jung has called the collective unconscious, but he has not clearly defined this term, in which he includes elements of different, even opposite natures, namely primitive, archaic structures, and higher, forward-directed activities of a superconscious character. If you want more information, read the 2 essays on analytical psychology, possible piece. So on the last page, which will bring us to the preceding diagram helps us to reconcile the following facts, which at first appear to contradict and exclude each other. Understand that metaphysics and esoteric spiritual studies is how to reconcile seemingly contradictions. Because opposites are really complements. The West has us thinking that opposites are opposing, conflicting energies, when in actuality, opposites are complementary. You only can have a whole when you have both parts. If you then think that both parts are separate, you never will have wholeness. You will have constant conflict. And that's the way they look at the world. They look at everything as opposites. Because personally, back to the original thing, genetically, biochemically, the door has been closed where they no longer directly experience the invisible. That means their whole consciousness is focused on the physical. And because the physical is founded on the invisible, that then means they're focused on the unreal. Then the only way to then make your reality be true is by force. Because if you were in tune with reality, you wouldn't have to use no force. It's just like jiu-jitsu. If you're in tune with the law, you ain't got to use force. You just stay in tune with it. Anytime you got to force something, you're out of alignment. So what you need to do is just step back and go in and get in tune with it. You know, like with that bank robber be doing them, the safe, yeah, he'd be like, you want to get real sensitive, right? If you get real sensitive, he can feel the tumblers clicking. He's not focusing in on the knob. He's trying to focus in on how the whole thing is connected to. So that's how life goes. If you just get, that's where meditation is so important, because it's a practice of tuning in. And then after a while, through practicing, you can just bring it to your mind, and you'll go there. That's why you just practice all that stuff. Eventually, you don't have to even practice it. It'll be there. You'll think like that. You'll operate like that. You'll be breathing from your diaphragm naturally. That means your breathing slow down. When your breathing slows down, your mind get calm. When your mind get calm, you're in more control. So it says, the seeming contradictions, the seeming duality, the apparent existence of two selves in us. Indeed, it is as if there were two selves, because the personal self is generally unaware of the other, even to the point of denying its existence, whereas the other, the true self, is latent and does not reveal itself directly to our consciousness. That means that you have to get sensitive. You have to understand the subtle as opposed to the gross. And so if you don't pull the energy back so you can receive, you won't get the message. The real unity and uniqueness of the self. There are not really two selves, two independent and separate entities. The self is one. It manifests in different degrees of awareness and self-realization. The reflection appears to be self-existent, but has in reality no autonomous substantiality. It's not substance. So it says the reflection appears to be self-existent. The European reflects light. They don't absorb it. They reflect it.
That's true.
So they're living in a false reality. They are actually self-existent. And they operate off the premise that we are autonomous, separate entities and can do whatever we want out there, and it's not connected to us.
Right.
Well, that's going to bring the reality back. So it says, it is, in other words, not a new and different light, but a projection of its luminous source. The reflection appears to be self-existent, but has in reality no autonomous substantiality. The reflection is not a new and different light, but a projection of its luminous source. Personality is like the moon.
The luminous source is?
The self,
the
the true self.
Okay.
And the reflection is the personality. Like the moon is a reflection, the light of the moon is a reflection of the sun. The moon has no light of its own. So what we're looking at is the light from the sun reflecting off the moon, and we're seeing that. And the thing that creates the changes in the shape of the moon is the shadow of the earth on the moon. Makes the moon change shapes. And so the shapes that we see changing in our world is the various forms, the earth, the material things that are changing the reflection. And so if you're tripping off the reflection, then when physical things change, the reflection is going to change. But if you tune into self, regardless of what is flashing across the screen, you're going to know what reality is. Yeah.
I just want to correct your moon analogy, because the moon analogy was so good. You used the eclipse of the moon, meaning our perception from our self-centered. But the phases of the moon are an actuality, and I think this is key in the analogy. The phases of the moon are an actuality of our perception of the moon in its relationship to the point of light, the different phases of the moon, as opposed to an eclipse, meaning ourselves coming between the moon and the light.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that analogy must be made clear so that we can carry that through, that when we see a personality reflecting a certain way, and it may have its phases it's going through, it is its relationship to the light which we are perceiving as being the changing attitude. Do you understand what I mean there? As opposed to, you use the eclipse analogy, and that is a special event.
So then the first quarter, how is the first quarter created?
The first quarter is created by the moon's position to the luminous source, relative to our position in perceiving it,
Right.
as opposed to us, the earth,
Reflecting
eclipsing
on
the
it.
moon.
Right. Okay. You understand what he's saying?
And I think that that analogy is so absolutely
Right.
correct.
Okay.
The
Same
luminous
difference.
source is the personal self.
Is the sun.
The sun.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And
But
then,
I mean, in the individual, it's the personal self.
The higher self.
And then the
Not
reflection,
the personal self, the higher
it's
self.
the higher self.
Right.
And then the reflection is
Is the
truth.
personality.
Is the personality.
Right.
which can change
Right.
relative to the higher self.
Right. Which is relative to the, my point was is relative to the physical, the earth, the relationship that we have relative to the physical things changes the reflection on how we perceive the reflection. If it's physically, if it's still related to our function, and with my analogy was saying that because we get hung into the physical changes in our life, we constantly think we get redirected or out of alignment on what the true light is. We start tripping off, oh, I'm going through this change now. So that's taking me here. And I'm going through this change now, and it's taking me there. All of it is still a reflection. If you center in on your higher self, it just becomes, it enables you to go through changes in your life and don't get all upset. Because you know the changes are actually just a reflection of your personality. And so it's teaching you different relationships or different insights, but your true self, if you get tuned in your true self, you won't be moved by none of it. Because your true self is the one. So once you center it in, and you operate from that, wherever you are, you will operate from that. So it's like us moving from geocentric to heliocentric. Yeah.
Would that be, I see that somewhere like in older people, they go through all the changes, or when they get older and elderly, they just lay back, something happens, and, oh, I don't even worry about that. This is what's important. Able to just, you know, it's
Right.
that's petty.
Right.
Whereas people that's caught up into it really get tight and tense and
Right.
anxiety sets in.
Right. And so the ultimate goal of the conditioning is to get one to tune in. Like last week we talked about understanding your natal chart, understanding your sun, how the sun represents the self. So understanding what that energy is, what is that particular energy, the element that you're in. That's going to be part of how you operate. You know, and we gave you some other techniques you can get into to understand that would relate to your purpose. So once you send into your purpose, wherever you go, you will come from that. So outer things won't change you. You'll adapt to them, but you'll stay centered. So wherever I go, I try to be the same. Basically, I might change my outer dress, or I might speak this way or that way relative to the audience, but behind what I'm saying is the same thing. I might not say esoteric, metaphysical, philosophy. I might say philosophical.
Right.
But if you look at what I'm talking about, I'll be talking about fidelity, steadfastness, higher consciousness, lower consciousness, or whatever, but in a different terminology based upon the situation.
But is that the true self?
The true self is the invisible.
Right.
It's what's behind.
Right.
It's what's the inside,
Right.
not the outside.
Okay. So, but if the true self is late and it doesn't reveal itself to the consciousness, then you only deal with the reflection.
Ooh.
The person.
But what I do is start to reveal the aspects or characteristics of the true self to consciousness.
Okay, but that means that you have to be
Start waking you up.
Okay, but you see, that means you go in and get that, and then you manifest it.
Right.
You see, it does not manifest itself.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I had to be trained or develop the understanding and awareness to do that. Yeah. That's where the lesser mysteries is where you're provided with the techniques and the disciplines and the understanding to be able to then allow that to be obedient to the call. Because everybody's being called, but everybody's not being obedient to the call. We go against the call. So then basically the conditioning and the mysteries allowed you to understand who you really are and the consequences of following the outer as opposed to the inner. You know, because people are not aware. They're not aware of this.
Well, this is a long way off, then.
What is?
Getting to that point.
Oh, sure.
You see, but as we look at it here, it appears that it's just something that you can develop, and it happens. But
that's true.
But this is only after you get all the building blocks that we're still waiting on, right?
Yeah. Right. This is like the blueprint. Like we had the blueprint to the pyramid. It might still take us 40 years to build it.
Yeah.
Right.
So we just have to be aware that this is a process and patience.
Fortitude. We're coming right back around to the point. Right. Because along the way, you're going to encounter all kind of adversity. And so the issue is, do you have the fortitude to keep going and not get all pissed off or resentful because this meeting didn't come out the way I wanted to come out, so I ain't going to participate no more. You know, or this affair didn't come. I had it built up in my mind, you know, that it was going to be this big, great thing, and it was only this little great thing. Because it wasn't the big, great thing, I'm resentful or pissed off, or because they didn't accept every one of my ideas immediately, then I don't want to play, or I don't, you know, we lack fortitude. But the thing is to get it out of this. People say spiritual, they think spiritual is like on a mountain somewhere, you know, in the woods, you know, now I'm being spiritual. You know, the spiritual go out to the market and picking up the food and getting in line and having patience. While you're doing that. That's spiritual. Right. So, the last piece is, well, that was it. That got us to the 7. And understanding that it takes us back to what was the true purpose of psychology. That take you back to your 7 elements of philosophy. Take you back to your memory banks. Y'all remember that one? No. Philosophy. It's a sign for the soul. It is the soul which knows. So the higher self and the soul are synonymous. So the soul is the higher self in you. He said, it is the soul which knows and remembers. It is the soul which bestows wisdom upon the body out of experiences. Evolution, therefore, should be regarded not as the body, growing of bodies, or the unfoldment and development of bodies, but rather as soul growing up through bodies. Let's think about that. Bodies are vehicles for the soul to grow. Like a car.
Yeah. That's the hardest part to get, to accept, because, you know, when you look at a body, you know, and the life leaves the body, the energy leaves, the body is just, you know, it's just nothing.
Sure.
I mean, it's just there. So, I mean, it's an instant.
Sure.
Say, but then on the other hand, you said, well, this was a vehicle that I used.
Right.
You know, so, and I just discard it when it's used.
Chain in for a new model.
When it's used, yeah, when it's used up.
As soon as you find an appropriate vehicle for your journey, then
off one and
you
then
get
another.
into it, and you're off again. At least down here, you're off, you know.
Yeah.
You're all back down here.
It's a cold concept when you look at it straight up.
Cold, right? Yeah, it's cold.
We all know we want to go, but we don't want to jump.
Say that, you know, that it's not a cord, but it's an energy, right? It's a connection. Yeah, all of them are interconnected. It's an energy connection that they actually say when the soul leaves the body, there's two places, either out of the top of the head or some people say out of the throat area. Soul leaves the body. And that it appears that there is a energetic connection between that spiritual energy and the physical body. So someone says it's similar to a silver cord. But it's similar to, I mean, if you really look at the analogy, everything that in the physical world has an analogy in the other levels. So just like your etheric body, you have an etheric, energetic body that looks like your physical body, but it's an energy pattern. And you have an astral, which is which relates to the emotional plane, is also a dimension. It's another energetic dimension. There's a good book by, I got my cards called Finding the Third Eye. I think it's by Adler. So she goes over, it's really a little small book too, because she goes over each of the bodies and how each of the bodies operate. You know, the physical body, the etheric body, the astral, the mental, the intuitional, the higher mind in terms of energy and how it's related. So, fortitude, we already came all the way back around to fortitude. And the issue of freedom from resentment under the experience of persecution. I think it was last week we talked about the issue of ultimate justice and how the ancients capitalized on the natural instinct to return injury with kind. Did we talk about that?
That was at AMU.
That was at AMU.
You've been dumping
That stuff blended together here.
Yeah.
Well, I guess next we're going to bring a hand that will open up with this hand up. We need to get into a heavy conversation about that because it deals with the issue of loving one's enemy. And the whole perspective that from a higher spiritual level, if one is truly of higher consciousness, one then understands the conditioning that has created people's behavior, if you truly understand. Which means if you truly understand it, then you know that it is a function of external conditioning and not just an inherent behavior, because all things are part of the one. So everything has a purpose here. So then what is the purpose of the experiences that are being provided by this particular entity? It's for a reason. Because everything in the universe is for a reason. And if you are aware of this, and the reasons that created all of this, and the thing behaves the way it behaves, then you don't get upset about it. You just recognize it for what it is. And then you operate appropriately. What does that mean? You got love. See, and you're missing the point. Because if you say that the point is, if everything is a function of the one, then everything is also an expression of the divine and has a part to play in the divine scheme of things. So if one says they evolve into a true spiritual level of consciousness, or an evolved level of consciousness, then one then understands this and also can love the thing for its connection to the whole. It may not love its behavior. Okay. I'm not saying you say, like, a snake coming in and over and try to bite you on the leg. I say, well, that's a divine creature, so I just, I can't do nothing to it. But if I know that it's following certain laws, then based upon my own knowledge of the laws, I can then control it by either doing certain sounds that it don't like, or putting a certain thing in between you and it, or making a sound over here that makes it go away, or whatever. The same thing is true for the oppressor. The oppressor can only oppress the oppressed to the level that the oppressor allowed itself to be oppressed.
Go ahead. That's right.
So to the degree that you are being oppressed is a reflection of the degree that you're not taking care of business. So in actuality, your oppression is letting you know what work you still need to do. Because some kind of way you got out of alignment.
Well, let's talk about love for a minute.
Sure.
What do you mean? What do you define as love?
Love?
Yeah.
Well, the Native Americans say love is care, to care for. That you care for this thing.
Care for it.
Well, everybody's gonna be where they're gonna be. We talking about philosophizing concepts. That don't mean you're there.
Yeah, right. I agree.
Right.
Agree.
Right.
I agree with that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you look at
But
this?
in order to get there,
Right.
you said you have to attain it.
Right. And so when you truly come into an understanding of the universe and creation and the bigger reality.
That snake saying using snake. Okay, you drag that snake away from you, but you're still feeding. That's love.
Right. Because the snake has a role
knowing
to
that it's
play.
going to grow, but knowing that it's going to grow, in its ability to do what it was going to do anyway.
Yeah.
Attack you, bite you.
But it only bites you in certain conditions. Snakes don't seek out people to bite them.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Now, again, we're talking about, okay, go ahead.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
Okay. We're talking about, again, a ultimate level of consciousness. Okay. And we have levels and degrees back down. Because at higher levels of consciousness, people can get bit by snakes and their poison don't affect them. Because they have mastered the physical plane. And we're talking about mastery levels of consciousness. Other levels that people can control snakes. Because they understand the laws upon which they operate, and they can manipulate those laws to maintain control of the vital.
And the oppressor understands the oppressed.
Yeah,
Like the oppressor.
that's right. And the oppressed don't understand itself.
Right.
Right. Because, brother, the oppressor is a minority. And so the only way that the minority can maintain control of the majority is through psychological warfare. It's not physical, it's psychological. It's all a sight game. Yeah, it's about consciousness.
So then, what you just said, it implies that if you, let's go back. You said something about feeding the snake shows that you love it. That implies that if you don't eat the snake, then you don't love it. But that's not necessarily true. You may love the snake, but not wish to participate in the foolishness of the snake or the unnecessary behavior of the snake. That doesn't mean that you don't love the snake. It just means that you're not going to contribute to the behavior of that snake. The snake can only bite you if you're close to it. It doesn't mean that you're not in love with the snake or whatever. You don't love the snake. You're just not going to make yourself big.
But see, once you evolve to another level, you don't become bait anymore because you can control the snake. Because you understand how the snake operates, and you can then manipulate those principles to keep it from harming you.
From harming you and from biting you are two different things. From harming you means that the behavior is still the same. From biting you means that you're in a position where you're able to change the behavior of the snake.
You say from harming you is what?
Hasn't changed the behavior, it just means that you deal with it differently. But the snake is still biting, which is perceived to be the negative behavior, right?
If harming you is biting you, then to prevent it from harming you is also to prevent it from biting you.
Well, but the snake can, at certain levels, like you said, right? The snake can bite you, but it won't have much effect on you. But
Right.
Insofar as the snake is still biting, right?
Because that's the nature of the snake. That's just like the wind blowing or the sun shining.
Well,
You can stand the sun
about-
too long and it can hurt you. So if you understand the laws of the sun, then you don't stay in there to the degree that it will hurt you. You can look at it directly and hurt yourself.
Sure.
If you're ignorant of the law, then you go around hurting yourself. Once you
That's
become
right.
knowledgeable, then you operate in obedience to the laws.
Right.
So we're saying this in terms of the Europeans.
Right.
Once we understand the laws
That's key.
of operation, how they operate, how humans operate, how the mind operates, how society, civilization operate, then we
Talk about their ability. Europeans don't have to oppress everybody. That's something that's changeable in their behavior, as opposed to a snake who bites by nature, right?
that's by the way it's been conditioned, the way it
Right.
exists.
Right.
Right.
But
The
I'm
European
saying
is expressing its nature by the way it exists. See, once you change existence, because all living forms adapt to their environment. And so humans have the capacity to adapt quicker because we have conscious mind, choice, where animals, they adapt, but it's slower because they don't have conscious mind. But all things are functions of their experience. And so then the European is just expressing the function of his experience. And so then, and the only reason that they are doing what they're doing is because the consequences of their acts the negative consequences of their acts have not dominated or overflowed the positive benefits that they're getting. A lot of that is just psychological, because they believe that certain things are true which are not true.
That's right.
Because they're destroying the planet themselves, blah, 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 blah. And because of the psychological game that they're manipulating on the mass mind, they got people believing that this is not true. Now, they can perpetuate that because of other people are ignorant. Now, and they're doing it because they came out of an environment of law of scarcity, greed, individualism. They have now become recessive. They now have separated in terms of lack of production of melanin, which puts them out of contact with the universe. So they think they're self-existent. And they believe that I can do something over here, they ain't gonna affect me. So that is a created thing, because all human beings originally came out of Africa and had that kind of orientation. Now, whatever theory you relate to, either being the mulattoes that one got pushed up there, or black folks got trapped behind the glaciers and over 1,000 years transformed, whatever, it's still the same. It's a function of, So what I'm saying is, when you change the conditions, like if all black people had united and was operating from our level of how we exist, white people would fall in line with that.
Sure.
Because they were trying to get it.
But the thing is, life would be so much fun and jamming and stuff that they like, damn, I didn't know it could be like this. Because from their environment, it wasn't like that. So they never, and so when they came out of the north back down into the tropics, there has not been a time since they came out and started that whole conquest where globally our level consciousness rules. That's only been, what, 2,000 years? Compared to 100,000, 2 million? So what I'm saying is, relatively speaking, the experiences that we're having are like a blink of an eye in your life, not alone in your day. But it's like we're stuck right here. We are identifying in the blink. And so as long as we keep identifying with the blink, we're in the blink.
It doesn't seem related.
Related to what?
Well,
the question is that the nature of the oppressor and the nature of the snake are different, is what you're saying.
Yes.
How?
Because snakes are supposed to bite. That's part of their survival, right? And Europeans don't have to impress in order to survive. We know that because we know that people don't have to impress to survive.
What's the difference between a human and a snake?
There's many.
There's what?
That's it, there's many.
There's what?
Many. As far as
What's the main thing that separates the humans?
Capacity to reason.
Right. So now, what is that based on? The capacity to reason.
Your level of reality, your version of reality.
And where does your version of reality come from?
Your environment.
Right. Europeans' environment has defined their reality. And they're operating from that reality. So like the snake is operating from its reality.
Right. But again, my question was, why wouldn't it be best to just leave them to themselves, as opposed to forcing yourself to deal with them and put up with their version of reality and so on and so forth?
When you say to put up with their version of reality, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean to make yourself immune to the effects of their oppression and their behavior patterns.
He said careful.
You say make yourself immune?
Yeah, that's what you're saying. At certain levels of consciousness, the snakes invite you and it won't have any effect.
No, but I said the other level though, you know how to, the principles of the snake and then manipulate those principles so that the snake no longer harms you.
So it would be who?
Right. So in that perspective, what the greatest reality is, if you know that, first of all, what is the ultimate goal? What is the ultimate goal and purpose of life? It has a goal. Okay. We're instruments and functions of life moving toward a goal. So then the things that are happening along the way are helping us to arrive at that goal. So then in that context, the planet is whole. It's a one, it's not a separate. So then for us to operate in terms of saying we're not gonna, what? We're gonna separate from them or what? Not acknowledge them or not relate to them is to still be held captive by them.
Well, I think that again is of your environment, right? By changing your environment, by removing yourself from them, you change your environment, and then you put yourself in a position where you're able to regain control. Just like when they were in the caves, they were in an environment where they were taught to gain control of their environment. Because they didn't have anything else to contend with except for the basic thing on the
Now I'm talking about the final destination. Now you're talking about tactics that's to take you there. Because you're saying now separate yourself in order to get yourself together to then be able to reascend into a position of power that then puts them in check.
Not necessarily. But I mean,
Not necessarily?
well, I feel more like you only have control over yourself and your own destiny, right? So if you focus on yourself, then your exterior environment has little effect in changing you because you were focused on yourself. You're not
How do you define yourself, though?
Yourself is where your immediate needs are.
Is that what your true self is? What your immediate needs are?
Part of it.
Well, is it your true self?
Part of it.
Now, what
Part
is
of
your true
self
self?
lies in yourself.
You say part of, no, your true self
Well, your true
is
self
the
lies-
center of everything. Everything else is a part of that.
All right.
So
What
what
I'm
is your
saying
true
typically-
self?
Well, your true self still has a self to deal with, just like you have a spirit, but you gotta feed yourself. You have to
Yeah.
feed your body. You can't
Yeah.
deny that.
That's right.
Or your body will die.
That's right.
You know.
But I'm trying to, but that's
so-
still a function of the need of the truth. What I'm trying to get back at is what is the final destination? The final destination is the human family. It's the final destination. And if you allow 2,000 years of delinquent behavior so that's like you're gonna say the kids in the hood, because some of them are murdering and killing and doing whatever. You're saying that's negative behavior, so I'm writing them off. You're saying the same thing about white people. White people are part of the human family, if you like it or not.
What I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is this: if you are not able to deal with your child emotionally, then you're not able to deal with your child emotionally right now. You need to step back, give yourself time to get your thoughts together, and then you deal with your child.
Right.
But if you're in a bad frame of
That's
mind,
a tactic.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. I'm talking about the destination, goal, and that you're talking about a tactic to reach the goal, unless you're saying the goal is we have a world where all white people are walled off somewhere and don't participate in the global community.
although that may sound appealing, I don't think it would be the solution.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying is once you rise to a true level of real spiritual consciousness, true spiritual consciousness, you understand that all things are part of the creation.
Right.
And are have a part to play and are
Right.
a part.
Right.
And so to envision a reality that excludes a part is to not truly be in true spiritual understanding.
True. But not
Because now how you say you're going to acknowledge God that created all things and you not acknowledge all things.
Acknowledging, yeah.
But now we get into semantics. See, you understand what I'm saying.
I do.
Right. But I'm still understand, but I understand that people, see, we're talking about things to be achieved. Most of us, probably all of us, are not there. So, right. And so then, and it's okay. It's okay not to like white people. It's okay not to want to be with them. And I'm not telling people to want to be with them. I don't particularly want to be with them. You know, I could go amongst them and do what I have to do, but personally, I love black people. So, and fine. And I would love to just live in a black community in terms of where we do our thing and can be happy. But then if we really were in that environment, there could be other people there, would be no problem as long as they was down with the stuff. Like we always have been. If somebody can really do the do, you won't get respect. And no matter what color. Black people always been like that. We drum and dance, although we are sensitized behind the slave experience and want to have something of our own. And when the other folks come in, we get pissed off like, we can't have nothing, y'all gotta get everything, you know. But that's an emotional reaction. But if they can get down, you gotta give them their promise. Because to get down, you got to work. And I know some, I don't know too many drummers, I know some dancers that have achieved a level of very proficient movement. And you gotta say, they earned it. They didn't put the work in. Mm-hmm. If these other Negroes put the work in, it would really be rolling. But anyway, so I think I differ between goal and tactics to a goal. Because I agree that for us to achieve that goal, we have to go into self and get self together. Because if you don't have self together, how can you create a relationship? You can't create a relationship if you ain't got self together. That's true for personal relationships. If your stuff is all out of whack, and you try to engage in a relationship, the relationship is going to be out of whack. The more you have yourself together, the more meaningful and harmonious relationships you can have. Unless some of those lower unconscious complexes start popping out, which can happen too. So anyway, we didn't go. I was going to do that handout for you guys on the, although we're going to revisit that again in terms of the issue about how the ancients used energy, that it can be used for negative, and they capitalized on the natural tendency to return injury in kind. They capitalized on it by not returning negative for negative, but giving positive for negative. Because it takes extra energy for you to give back positive for the negative, then you actually give more energy. You get more energy or more capital out of the effort.
What haven't we been doing that?
Sure we have. And it is good. We've been humanizing the planet from that. But there's other things we haven't been doing. It's the thing that we haven't been doing that's the problem.
Of course, which gain is anomaly.
And Don Henry Clark said it, we don't aspire to national management. That's his thing. He said two things. He said, one, we should never forget that our greatest gift is our African humanity. And the other thing is that we have been stripped of the desire for national management. And that is the critical issue.
National management.
National management.
Nation building.
Yeah. How many people here are studying or training to be a manager or to manage a national system? An economic system, an educational system, a health system, a communication system, a technological system, a transportation system. You don't have nobody, I'm going to school because I want to create a system. I'm going to school because I want to go work in somebody's system.
It's true. It's true.
Right.
Yeah.
And once we can get our minds reorientated, that's when we're going to become free, because we deal with the means of production. That's why I say we all are on AFDC. Because we don't build electrical, I go stick a plug and get juice. Now I got to work a job to go pay for it, but I'm not directly in the production of that, or the food I eat, or my car I drive, or clothes I wear, or this, we didn't build this building. So it's that mentality. We should have the mentality, we need some space. Hey, let's tear this wolf off the sucker and put another story up here. How many of us can do it? Let's rewire this baby and have it with the lights is different.
Oh, we could do that.
Well,
We can put it with them.
hey, it's that kind of stuff.
Bring that tomorrow morning.
Yeah, speaking tomorrow morning.
Right.
That's right.
I mean, see, but that's the kind of attitude
Yeah.
we have to take. That's what's missing. We come to organizations, people wonder, what should we, be doing? In the old days, man, they build churches by cooking dinners. Can't even get people to cook, they don't want to work and stuff, they want to do grandiose plans, they want to do a big thing. They don't have the capital to do it, most of them don't have the experience to do it. They don't want to do little stuff. Oh, that's petty. They don't do nothing.
Well, our whole educational system teaches us what to think. They don't teach us to think individually or just come up with your own thoughts. So it's that training that you get from when you're this high. So by the time you're adult, you're still going through the motions of thinking what you've been told of things.
That's right. That's what we're trying to tell you.
Miseducation system.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I think the main place everybody can start is at home, because we all come from a family. And if you can start making arrangements or changes or some kind of program that you're gonna follow on a constant basis. But if you're doing your house with, start to peep out and, if you're gonna build something at home, then hopefully the attitude just keep going. From your family.
You gotta find people, I think, that like thinking.
Right.
To be.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well,
your family, necessarily have it. That's the reason why I made that comment.
Yeah.
My family, they all the way everywhere.
Of course, how do we aspire to national leadership if we can't aspire to leading our family?
Agreed. I agree. It's a struggle. But the other thing too, strategically, you also have to create mechanisms where people see black people working together in constructive and productive activities, because that then becomes a motivational factor for other people to get involved and do things. Sometimes we have to commit ourselves to having the fortitude and the patience of working in situations where we feel we're being persecuted, be it the people that want to accept our ideas, or people that are big-headed or hard-headed, or all that. See, all that's a part of the virtue, to build a true character. If you can be with that and be with it over a long period, you will become successful. That's the walking on water thing. You get in those situations and we get drowned by, impatience and, that kind of thing. And so that's why we don't win. Because most of the stuff that we had started before, a lot of those ideas are successful ideas, we just couldn't be consistent. We let somebody's attitude get in the way, or we let two people that trip and, get us to tripping, all this kind of stuff. So, but that's what I'm saying. People can do stuff at home and it's always good, but at the same time, in the bigger context, you have to come together to do things in a collective manner so that people can see this, so they can get motivated, that kind of thing too. So I just want to say that because some people just go home and start working on their personal stuff, and it's easier and it's, and it's good, but the ultimate is community. In the African way, it's community. Yeah, it's about community. So community centers, neighborhood centers, it should be a network. Every neighborhood eventually should have network centers, Eventually it should be a school. The school we should be in one of these local schools doing this, We have classes going over there and drum building and, lectures and movies and people are building models and, working on computers. The school should be open 24 hours. That's right.
Yeah,
In churches.
Yeah,
all
the institutions, right. That's right.
That's an institution.
Right. So, anyway, time is about up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, just in thinking this through and in dealing with a study group on a whole international network of study groups, the whole system is there because the family doesn't really do that. The competition and the problems in the family, say, start in the family. You really got to start in the community and take it to the family. You have to learn. This group is far more liable to start nation building than the families we have in this area. Nation building is going to start in this room. It won't start at the school. It won't start in the neighborhood. You take it there. You cross the street and take it there.
And you got people that here that's probably think it's simple.
Exactly.
And that's my point. From a spiritual context, many times your blood family is not necessarily your spiritual family. Because it's like-minded people. It's like-minded family, You get all kinds of stuff going on in your family. And so you don't discard it, you deal with it. But in terms of see, the thing that we need to really do, is we need to really get back to looking at revolutionary theory and what a revolution is and how a revolution is carried out. Not to try to import those, but to look at the principles of how successful revolutions happen, and then in the context of where we exist today, apply those principles in the context of how we exist today. And because that's, and most of us are very afraid to engage, in that intense, because of what happened in the 60s, that whole issue of COINTELPRO, blah, 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 blah. But we can change the name and call it, community development, you know, it's the same thing. You're going to do the same type thing. And I started off saying I get into the same. To me, one of the critical pieces is, we should start is with what is wrong with the organization of African American. What is wrong with it? And if nothing is wrong with it, why don't we do it? The thing is looking at it, seeing it. Because I mean, he's talking about your own schools. You should be controlling the policy and the resources of your own communities. And then if you're in a community and you're in a mixed community, then you have to find your interest and have coalition and alliances for the best interest of the whole community, which is what it's really all about. So anyway, on that note, I'll have to end because I need to get a phone around here, y'all, because I had 911 I set up here and they didn't beat me back, so we'll take care. Okay, I have for those who stayed, you can pick up this second handout. It's called The Qualities of the Will. It talks about the different types of will. You know, you have a personal will, you have a skillful will, you have a transpersonal will that have different attributes and different qualities. So just recognize that they can help you bring those qualities to play in the different situations you find yourself in. So for those who stay till the end. Oh.
Holistic approach in the psychology of personality. That's number 7. Can we read it? Holism and evolution was Jan Smuts. Then, of course, we also have the course of becoming by Alford, and the motivation and personality of Maslow, the death and rebirth of psychology by R. Hogarth, and theories of personality by Calvin Hall. Those are some of the books that eventually we will be quoting from at different times as we go through this study. And that's just through that insight that I'm giving you. The personality, the personalistic standpoint has been also upheld by a number of other writers in that field. But this is the holistic approach and the psychology of the personality. Otherwise, the common denominator is in relationship to the word holistic, H-O-L-I-S-T-I-C, and wholeness. And that is what one should strive for, is to strive to bring into their life a state of wholeness. We live in a disjointed phase where there's no holiness. You see, that word holy comes from the religious point of view, but wholeness comes from the psychological point of view, because it is only the soul that makes us complete. That's the spiritual part that we must upbring within our states of consciousness. So that's the idea of what we mean by holist, or holy, and wholeness. So that's the other approach. As we get into the English language, we can see the dovetails of those various words that will mean one thing, and yet a larger thing in terms of that. Now listen, I'm going to talk today, and you have to listen. Okay? All right. I might tell you something about you, something that you remember. Number 8. Everybody can answer me, I see. Number 8. What is number 8?
inter-individual and social psychology.
And psychiatry. So, social psychology and psychiatry. And the anthropomorphical study of man. Now, give me the whole, maybe I didn't read it to you as I gave it out. Did I give you all that?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, well then, don't cut me short. Individual and social psychology and psychiatry and the anthropomorphical study of men. Whew. How do we deal with this? Social individual and social psychology and psychiatry. Those are the divisions in which we define the difference between psychology and psychiatry. Psychology, in one particular sense, is the large field of those who refer to themselves as psychiatrists, as working in the field or expressing in the field of psychology. And the next one is psychiatry. Now, as I was defining here just a while ago, that I understand that the young work more as a psychiatrist. Dr. King, who's here sometimes with us, his background is in the field of psychiatry. But I often tease him to the extent that says, well, you came out of academic school, so what did they teach you in terms of the soul? No. Because church and state are divided. You have to let the teaching of the soul come from the church. And the academic field will teach you psychiatry or psychology, dealing with the mind. And so those are the differences in which we define. You might study that and get more familiar with the field. But as I begin to define it, and let's see, I don't see, yes. I think in terms of this, one of the most vital authors is the contributions of Sorokin. Sorokin I have used a number of times in terms of his work because I found it very vital to our understanding as it relates to the field of psychology, and I've used him a number of times. He has about 4 or 5 books, but you'll find the outline of most of this material in our earlier magazine. I don't have a copy of it here. But the first one that we had the cover with the phoenix bird on it, and given us the insight in terms of the word as we express it in relationship to love. Now, our avatar, Martin Luther King, as he began to give us an insight to the idea of love, he gave us 3 factors: eros, Philippian, and agape. Now that's a 3-phase factor. But we know in the psychology, in the field of philosophy, we should have 4 factors, which gives us the firm foundation, as it is defined in Masonry, that the cornerstone of the temple is a cube. And so that gives us further insight as to what we build on in terms of our own states of consciousness. We must build it in terms of the 4-fold factor. And of course that 4th factor, in which I think it's mentioned one time, and I'll have to go back in relationship to that, is altruistic. phases. And that's what we come to now in terms of actually knowing what is an altruistic love. All of those phases dealing with love. But we have to understand it, and that's the other phase. That particular phase is what Sorokin defines in terms of bringing all mankind in a oneness. And of course, as I have stated, what is the very essence of love that makes all mankind one? Remember?
Sex.
Sex. Who said sex?
I said it.
Who's you?
It's me.
Oh, me. Well, all right then. Not you, but me. Me or you. We all are related in terms of the oneness that brings all mankind in terms of a oneness. A woman or a man, vice versa, whichever it may be, have a relationship, and out of that relationship comes a human being. So that has been proven because they've gone all around the globe, and that has happened. And we never know other things that's come back out, but a human being, because of the breath of life. As far as we know now, if we go back maybe billions of years, we don't know what. But we are observing now, you see, what was in the past and what will be in the future. But now is the time, in terms of the time factor. So that's what we're saying. So Sorokin's work is very important to our understanding in relationship to. What was that? Was that number 8? Number 8, yes. One of the other ones that is mentioned here, and perhaps you would know that Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead and her work. She's in the field of anthropomorphical field, in which I use the term to define the idea that has been put on, that has been accepted by we who do not understand, as in relationship to the God idea as being an anthropomorphical being. Or otherwise, as that image of the God idea was painted in the Sistine Chapel as a man. And so therefore that's where we get all through the Bible when they speak of God as he and so forth. Huh?
Father.
Father, yes. Father, daddy, papa. My father was papa. Sugar daddy. All of those other bastards. But they all mean basically the same thing. That which is the essence of what I need in terms of providing certain things in which I feel that I need. And so that's the thing. So that's the God idea in terms of that. Being I'm praying to God and He'll give me everything I need. All these songs I listen to them before the season program come on. He has 2 hours of religious music. Really? Patricia, did you find the program this morning? I forgot to tell you prior to that time, maybe you listened at it, that one comes on at 8 o'clock, from 8 to 10. But from 6 to 8, then they have a hallelujah chorus. Then they go down. Clap your hands, get together. Woo, my goodness. So that's further insight to number 8. Now, where do we go in terms of 9? What is it?
Active technique and treatment and development from the personality.
Development of the personality. Active technique for the treatment and development of the personality. all or nearly all the previously mentioned approaches have led to the adoption and the use of a large number and varieties of active techniques. The comparative older ones are hypnosis, suggestions, and auto-suggestions described and used for the two schools of dance. Now I stopped once because one of the names in which I became familiar with back in 1919, anybody remember those years? No, I don't think so. I just want to see if I can catch you if you listen to what I'm saying. So, a psychologist, you would say, or a minister, came from France. His name spelled C-O-U-E, emphasis on the E, Kui, in the French. And he spent some time in Chicago at the auditorium where they were at a seat capacity between around about from 1,000 to maybe 2,000 people. And of course, I wasn't thinking about it, but I heard about it and read about it at that time. But he was giving out a meditative approach towards healing. And that, as I began to hear it, that's one of the things that I stuck into my mind, and I've used it all along. And this meditation, you write this down and you put it in your computer as you bring it up here. Day by day and every week, I am getting better and better. You sit down, quietly, begin to, that's a mantra. That's a mantra you get. Day by day and every way, I'm getting better and better. Day by day and every way, I'm getting better and better. I got to get better and better because day by day and every way I'm getting better and better. And if every day I'm getting better and better and better, I'm not getting worse because day by day I'm getting better and better. Now, did you get all of that? So that's what we give you in terms of the mantra as we give it in your meditation cycle in terms of the meditation health, wealth, and happiness. So those are the things in which you are computing the brain or the mind that begins to act. You see, it acts according to the thought patterns that you put into it. So if you affirm those things, that's the affirmation in which we say. If you affirm those things, then that's the phase of what we've defined as active techniques. Those are active techniques that you can use. If you want to get, if to the extent you go to Science of Mind and they give you various things for health, wealth, and happiness. If you want a car, you want a house, and things of this kind, those are the things. And I have to confess that when I saw this place here, where we here back 57, that's the technique that I used in terms of this. I said, that's the place I'm going to have. In a few days I had it. You see, that's what we mean in terms of the technique of practice. You claim what you want and so forth. But then at the same time, they said, a lot of times, you might get what you want, and there's so much trouble, you wish you didn't have it. You see? So it's according to what you want. It may cause you a lot of trouble, you see.
Think about it, huh?
Right? Yes.
Investigate it.
But we have in our book, those are the decisions you make. You see? We give you that particular outline. I think before you were present of this, but those are the things you make decisions as to what you wanted. But I wanted this for a spiritual community. And when I came here and told the gentleman what I wanted, and he said, yes, I it can have it. Because the other person that was bidding for it wanted to use it for a cabaret. You see? And so he wanted it for some type of, who was a spiritual, intellectual, material kind of thing. So I laid my cards on the table and I beat that other person out because it was really because it satisfied him. And we had the means otherwise to get it. And so that's what I'm saying. So, as they say, the active facets in terms of your life can open a way for you. It is for you, you see. But you can also get what you don't need. And so you have to be careful in making choices. You see. As I look back, I see, I think it was my first wife. Never mind. Well, anyway, I don't think we were quite compatible in that sense, although we did get married and so forth like that. But she was a hell in my bonnet at that particular time. And so I said, I didn't need this woman. She too much on me, too much for me. So we had to get a divorce. Well, I knew that particular time, that's what I wanted. She was one of those beautiful little things. How it happens? Sometimes maybe just go and spend a visit to another one of my friends, and later on, Doctor, is Big on her out there? Yes. Then I popped up to the home. There she was right on. How the hell did you find me? And that's the truth. I ain't telling you no lie. I'm not trying to be funny. And of all the places when I wanted to stick away a little change, I put it in the rim of my hat. And that was the first place she looked. I didn't have the techniques for her. So I'm talking from experience. Physical experience. Oh, man. So, let's see if they give any books. Well, I spoke about
treatment.
All the suggestions come out basically of some of the schools, and especially in terms of the churches like the Sanctified Void and so forth like that. Those suggestions, all those suggestions that they give you, and when they begin to orate you in terms of the repetitions of ideas. Jesus saved! Jesus saved! Jesus saved! And of course, in repetitions, I can't think of a number of things in which they do, and so forth, but that's all a suggestion. And so therefore, you say, yes, and you accept it. So that's what this is all about, the treatment and development of the personality, the operating in the structure of the personality. And that personality is